הדוברת השלישית שלנו היא פרופסור תירוש סמואלסון מאוניברסיטת מדינת אריזונה, וחווה תדבר על אריך פרום, אהבה, כמיסטיקה חילונית, וההרצאה תהיה באנגלית, אבל לפני זה אני רוצה להקריא משפטים ספורים על הביוגרפיה של חווה. פרופסור תירוש סמואלסון היא ריג'נט פרופסור להיסטוריה ופרופסורית על שם אירווינג ומרים לאו ליהדות מודרנית באוניברסיטת אריזונה שבטמפ אריזונה. פרופסור סמואלסון כותבת על ההיסטוריה האינטלקטואלית היהודית, על מדע ודת, על דת ואקולוגיה, ונוסף ליותר מ-75 מאמרים ופרקי ספרים, היא המחברת של 4 ספרים, האחרון שבהם בתרגום עברי הוא, לא מתורגם, אבל בתרגום עברי של הכותרת זה יהדות סביבתית בעידן פוסט חילוני, רוחניות ארצית, ובאנגלית Jewish Environmentalism in the Post-Secular Age, Earthly Spirituality. חווה היא גם העורכת הראשית של הספרייה של הפילוסופים, חווה היא העורכת הראשית של הספרייה של פילוסופים יהודים בני זמננו, שיצאה לאור בין 2012 ל-2018, שכוללת 21 כרכים. היא ערכה 8 ספרים, וביניהם הספר מורשתו של הנס יונס, יהדות ותופעת החיים. תודה חווה, בבקשה את מוזמנת להתחיל.
As greetings from Arizona. I'm going to speak in English because I write in English and I live in English. So you'll excuse me about, you'll forgive me about that. It's wonderful to be with you, and I'm sorry I couldn't hear other lectures except for the lectures on this session, but it sounds like a terrific conference. So we are going to talk about art of loving. That's the center of our conversation. And what's interesting in this wonderful bestseller, sold over 25 million copies, translated into about 30 languages, that there was a very clear message, and I'm not totally clear that people always got the message. In a nutshell, From's message was that only if we understand love correctly and practice the art of loving diligently can we fully realize our human potential, overcome our alienated, bifurcated, and fragmented existence, and experience the unity of our shared humanity. So I characterize From's approach to love as secular mysticism. Secular in a sense of this worldly, and mysticism in a sense of unity of experience that transcends individuality but without demolishing it. From's secular mysticism articulated a vision that calls all people to love life with all its multiplicity and diversity and ensure its continuity in perpetuity. So the art of loving is not only the art of living, it's also the art of loving life. That is biophilia. I'll say more about that later. So From's art of loving has ecological implications that necessitated political activism. That's why he was at the forefront of the anti-nuclear armament issue that was so big after World War II. Fromm was indeed a lover of life, and he was involved in the international peace movement, opposed the war in Vietnam, and engaged in American politics as a member of the Socialist Party. Love for Fromm is not merely an expression of emotions, but rather it's a principled stance that is philosophically grounded and politically engaged. Specifically, Fromm's theory of love, as articulated in The Art of Loving, was a manifestation of what is known to scholars of Fromm as radical humanism. And he already spelled it in Man for Himself, written in 1947. Is situating the art of loving in the life of Fromm himself. Then I'll say something about types of love. I'll go through that section rather quickly. It was mentioned several times. And finish with love as secular mysticism. So that's the structure of my talk. And now let's go in. The reason I do this is that we talk about love in general, but Prom actually was known as a ladies' man. In other words, he had love relationship and more than one. So let's go over some of it very quickly, but you'll see the complexity of his life. My point is that it's not that he felt he wrote the book not because he was an expert of love, but rather because he experienced the difficulties of love, the complexity of love. So the first major love relationship is Frieda Reichmann or from Reichmann. I'll refer to her as Reichmann. So Frieda Reichmann, she was his therapist. He met her. She introduced him to psychoanalysis. She was 11 years older than he was. The relationship is clearly very much a motherly type relationship. But yet, what's interesting here, the marriage didn't succeed. Very quickly, after a few years, became very clear that it's not going well. But what's interesting in this story, that they remained friends until the end of her life. Actually, they really helped each other throughout life. They ended up being divorced in 1942, but it's only after actually he helps her to get, in case people don't know, I did not know it, she tried to be in Palestine in 1934, didn't make it, went to the United States, and it was he, Arik, who helped her to settle in the United States. So here's an example of motherly love that turns into professional and friendship that lasted throughout life. That's very different from the second major love relationship in his life. That's Karen Horney. She too was already an established psychoanalyst when the two of them met. She was they began as friends, they began as colleagues in a sense that are interested, shall we call it, in neo-Freudianism, in other words, developing different attitudes within Freud scholarship. She enables him to get to the United States, but from 1934, when the relationship turns romantic, everything changes. So for a while, they are in a romantic relationship. She goes with him on a lot of long trips at those years in their 30s to overcome his tuberculosis. He was engaged in very long voyages, actually, a lot of them sea voyages, and she's with him. Yet the two of them are going to fall, basically, it's going to be a major breakup, that it was both personal as well as professional. And here the close relationship, what started this close relationship became romantic love, ended in a bitter public dispute in which professional and personal motivation, those two were kind of entangled. So she was very upset about a love affair that he had at the time with Catherine Dunham, a 29-year-old dancer, choreographer, and obviously she was very upset about that. But there were also other factors that made this particular breakup very, very difficult. And what's interesting, so they split professionally and personally. They go different ways. And it was a very bitter, I think that the bitterness of that love affair that ended up badly will explain a little bit how he looks at love. The third woman in his life, and that happens as soon as the relationship with Horney is over, the relationship with Henny Gurland starts. She's a very interesting woman who really influenced him greatly. This woman who, in case people are not familiar with her, she was the woman who was actually whipped over from France to Spain. She was the first person to see what happened when he committed suicide. And a very interesting woman. The story here in this relationship is that she becomes sick with a very debilitating form of arthritis, and he becomes her major caretaker. So when he talks about care and a responsibility, that happens because he knows quite a lot about how to take care of one individual. Mexico, most people know they moved from United States to Mexico. That in itself is an interesting story. But he understood the complexity and the sadness of love in that particular relationship. So she's also very responsible for his interest in Zen Buddhism. I'll come to that later on, but we cannot understand his commitment to Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, although he was introduced already in 1926, only after he meets with her in 1944 that he becomes so engaged in it. And that's relevant to his secular mysticism. And that's the third wife. And he writes the book while in the first three marriage of to Annis Freeman. Very interesting lady as well. She herself was a widow of actually 3 husbands, so he was her 4th husband. So all of these people understood quite a lot about death, about loss, about difficulties in life. That relationship was good, but to the credit of his biographer, he actually had love affairs even during this very successful marriage. So it's something to keep in mind, that perhaps his understanding of love that we already heard about twice before in this session, perhaps there was something about this, the capacity to love everyone that probably is behind, I'm just speculating here, behind his proclivity to have love affairs. So let's keep in, so this was in a positive way, but these, in a sense, what he learns from all this is a summary of the 4 main constituents of care, responsibility, respect, and knowledge. And perhaps I would say that the least successful relationship was with Horney, but maybe in the beginning there was respect and more respect. I'm not sure about care and responsibility. That's probably was more from her to him rather than from here to her. But anyway, it all comes out of his own life experience. So now when we talk about what is love and how does he define love, so here are some examples how we need to think about love. And the key word here in the first statement is love is an activity. It's not a positive affect. So this to me kind of sounds very Aristotelian. Happiness is an activity, love is an activity. It's kind of an Aristotelian approach. It's an active concern for life and for growth. So that's kind of that's going to be what the kind of the biophilic, the broad understanding. It's not so much agapic, it's more biophilic, I would say, love of life in general. So it's an attitude, it's orientation. It's not so much the individual that matters, it's the attitude that matters. On the issue of love as an art, I think we don't pay sufficient attention to the fact that in his youth, he was a pianist. He was quite a good pianist, and actually his mother wanted him to be, or imagined him being a career pianist. That's not how it happened. But I think because he was a pianist and he knew quite a lot about music, he could understand what does it mean to be committed to a particular art. So look at the middle of the statement. This holds true for music, for medicine, for carpentry, and for love. Basically, love is something that requires a lot of attention, a lot of concentration, a lot of commitment. You have to practice it day in and day out. It's actually hard work in many ways. So now when we go to, so this is some of the many books that many editions, of The Art of Loving. It's amazing to me how successful this book was. And I'm really not sure that people who bought the book always, usually as a gift, right? It was given as a gift, that they really got what he wanted to kind of convey. And I'm definitely not sure that people actually practice The Art of Loving, because the difficulty that is involved in it. But here is what we already heard. There are various types of love or variants of love. So I'll go through this very quickly. The brotherly love, I think that's kind of the foundation of his understanding. That, of course, has to, we can look at other Jewish thinkers and non-Jewish thinkers who held that view, but I like us to look at this concept of human atonement. So that's what I call, this is what I see as kind of the mystical dimension here. It's not about love, it's about unity and sense of oneness with humanity as a whole. In terms of the love of the needy, of the helpless, that already was mentioned here. So clearly only a person with his education, with very good Jewish education, could have understood the importance of the love of the poor, the stranger, the widow. In that sense, I think he remains a traditional Jew, no matter how much he promotes radical humanism. At the bottom, it all comes from his Jewishness, even though he will define himself, of course, as an atheist Jew. The motherly love, I guess, is the foundation of, or the origin of this emphasis on care and responsibility. And I like the fact that he sees the connection between motherly love and the love of life. So look at the end of this quotation, where it says it's an attitude which instills in the child a love for living, which gives him the feeling it is good to be alive, it is good to be a little boy or girl, it is good to be on this earth. So I read him primarily as an ecological thinker, more than as a agapic thinker, I'll put it this way, or more as a theoretician. It's really about how you need to love life, and everything else follows from that love of life. So in terms of erotic love, it's one particular aspect of productive love or creative love. So that's all, there is a degree of feeling, but it's not just feeling, it's a decision. There is a willfulness that it's about commitment that you have to make toward a particular individual. So of course, romantic love is about an individual or a particular individual, but that particular individual, that specificity doesn't come at the expense of the generality. We are all part, look at the middle, we're all part of one. We are one. So that's what I call the secular mysticism of Aerich's form. In terms of self-love, and love of others, basically you have to love yourself in order to be able to love others. There's no contradiction here. We already heard about that. In terms of his understanding of God, keep in mind that his view is God is a symbol of what man strives for. So it's not an entity. You don't like an object when you love life and when you love God. And the reason for that, as we'll see in a minute, is his understanding of negative theology. So we'll come to it in a second. So when I say that he represents secular, or his understanding of love represents secular mysticism, it's really about the fact that God is not a reality, but God stands for certain ideals. And in the realm of love, reason, and justice, that's a bottom quote, you have a capacity you need to develop yourself in a particular way, and it's all part of the evolutionary process. In that sense, he's very much a naturalist. And what we love really is some kind of an ideal, ultimately, an ideal about, it's not even about whom, because there's no whom there. There's no person there. So it's non-personal, it's theoretical, and it's actually, there's nothing there in a sense of no thing. There's no thingness in his understanding of God. To me, the key message here, and why I love his work so much, is because of the biophilic tendency here. Biophilia is a passionate love of life and all that is alive. And maybe after listening to Gilad, maybe that's kind of an interesting point here, that maybe this is a variation on the Freudian understanding or later understanding of the difference between Eros and Thanatos. So biophilia is a kind of a develop of that understanding. We'll get to it when we think about biophilia versus necrophilia, two issues that Prom wrote a lot about. Maybe after Gilad said it, maybe this is a variation of an idea that can be traced to Freud, but it seems to me that that's really the greatness of it, because from that dichotomy, you can understand his political view very well. His critique, of course, of any kind of form of destructiveness in the political realm, and now we are surrounded by the destructiveness, of course, he will critique this form of necrophilia. So in terms of the rarity, why did he write the book? Some ways he understood the rarity of love in modern life, especially in capitalistic society, and he's trying to teach people how to appreciate, how to value love in a way that they didn't otherwise. So one of the major points about his kind of secular mysticism, I look at him as a radical, what is called, I don't invent that term, of course, a radical humanist, but perhaps in kind of a second thought, when a lot of thinkers who write about his radical humanism really say, well, he was kind of a Jew, or that's the legacy of his Judaism, or that's the Jewish legacy in him. They don't really take his Jewishness seriously, and that's of course a mistake. But he did, as a Jew who came out of an Orthodox world, he developed the concept of humanism because he felt that humanism is being lost, of course, and he saw the dehumanization of life, of course, during the war and afterwards, in a sense, 2 wars, right? Because his first experience was of World War I, and he was really shaken by what happened in World War I, even more so World War II. So that's less important, but he's an evolutionary thinker in many ways. He has to explain how the non-biological develop, how do we develop, how did this creature develop this combination of what he called the biopsychosocial being? How do we evolve in that way? So there's a lot about that. We won't get into it right now because the key for us, more important here, is that he defines himself as a non-theistic mystic. So that's his understanding from the art of loving. And the question is, what is non-theistic? So non-theistic, I think, simply means non-personal. This is his view of the world, kind of the mystical view, the mysticism that he aspires to. It's not universalism. You can say, well, maybe the concept of one way and one world, just universalism. And I think there's something truly utopian, as Nadav already said. And I think that's the beauty of his work, especially if we think when he wrote and what he had to say to the world after World War II. I think that message is very, very powerful. Who influenced, or the sources that influenced, of course, Spinoza is one. He has a very interesting insights about how Freud follows Spinoza and what was good about Freud. Maybe to go back to what Gilad said, I think he was a lot more, he was a critic of Freud very much so, but at the same time, we should remember that every time he talked about any given aspect, every given topic, he always starts with Freud. So there's enormous respect also for Freud, but also criticism of Freud. So I'm not sure that there's really a Retsach going on here, but rather a need to go beyond where Freud was and develop ideas that Freud wouldn't develop or didn't go in that direction. Maimonides, of course, is a major source of his negative theology. He has a lot to say about that, about Maimonidean thinking. I don't think he says anything new that we don't know, but about Maimonides, and that's a lot of research was much more profound than what he gave, but he understood Maimonides, I think, correctly. And the most interesting thing that he understood and emphasized the impact of Maimonides on Meister Eckhart. And here I think that Eckhart probably was the major source of influence on Prom. And I'm trying to think my place in my notes, so excuse me for a second. But basically, in case you don't know, you don't remember Eckhart's years, 1270 to 1327, I should have put it on the slide. But basically, he argues that Eckhart developed non-theistic mysticism, and it became louder in Spinoza and sounded in full strength in radical humanism in Marx. So it's Eckhart, Spinoza, Marx, and that's really where his radical humanism comes from. And not some, I mean, of course he knows Cohen, of course he knows Rosenzweig, but that's not really the main inspiration here. So some of the interesting, very interesting insight that he had are about monotheism as a critique of idolatry, as a negation of idolatry. A lot of his analysis of capitalist society and contemporary modern society as a idolatrous kind of situation or condition, I think is right on target. A lot has to do with the analysis of self-alienation. That goes, of course, back to Hegel and to Marx. So he is very much a good reader, very good reader of Marx. And I think that he's, again, right on the money here. I think that his analysis of idolatry fits exactly where we are today with the realm, the rule of technology over every aspect of life. Basically, technology is our contemporary idol. So if he were alive today, we would have a lot to learn from him on that score. So here are some. Everybody, of course, knows. Most people are familiar with his understanding of Marx, but I think that he, of course, reads the early Marx. He claims that it wasn't only the early Marx that developed the kind of the humanism, the deep humanism that he defends or that he kind of adapts, and I think for good reason. So Ronen has written about the X experience, but the X experience is really the kind of the distillation of what he understands about what is the relationship, how to understand any religious experience or any interaction with God. And the key here is the bottom two sentences. So it's all about self-transcendence, the disappearance of narcissism, destructiveness, necrophilous tendencies. That's what love is about. You can go beyond all of those tendencies which are in the human, but there's a possibility to go beyond that. And it leads to love of life, intellectual independence, freedom from psychic constraints. So that's really the ideal. And this is of course Suzuki, who was hosted by Prom in Cuernavaca, and the two of them became very good friends. This is in the mid-50s. Twice they spent a week together. And when he talks about Zen Buddhism in this particular book that they published together, you can see all the elements of his secular mysticism. So with this, I will conclude to say that I think really only Prom with his unique education, so rooted in the Jewish tradition and in the Western humanistic tradition, could have written The Art of Love, The Art of Loving, and of course The Art of Loving and The Art of Life, and also his book that came later, was published after, is The Art of Listening. They're all saying the same thing in a sense. And it's a critique of our dehumanized society, or dehumanization of by technology in our contemporary society. And I find the book as relevant 70 years after it was written as it was when it was written. So he was indeed the love's prophet, and hopefully we will listen to what he has to say and try to live by his wisdom. There's an awful lot of wisdom in his writings. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, פרופסור חווה תירוש סמואלסון. אני אעבור לעברית. תודה רבה לך, חווה. מיד תינתן הבמה לשאלות. אני רק רוצה לומר שני דברים. קודם כל, אין ספק שזו הייתה הרצאה מרנינה ומאלפת, שלמדנו על אריך פרום דברים שלא ידענו. את ספריו קראנו. אבל עליו כאדם, על חייו, אני לא פגשתי קודם את הסיפור הזה, וזה מזכיר לי עובדה מאוד מעניינת. הוא היה אדם שהיה מעורר אהבה, בזה אין ספק. הוא היה מסוגל לעורר אהבה בהרבה אנשים, לא באדם אחד. היה עוד אדם אחד כזה, האדם היחיד שכתבו עליו המון שירי אהבה בשפה העברית. בכל הספרייה של העם היהודי, יש רק קובץ אחד שנכתב על אדם חי, גם אדם אחרי מותו, שירי אהבה. לאדם הזה קראו שבתאי צבי. אנשים אהבו אותו אהבת נפש, וכתבו עליו שבתאי צבי אהוב, שבתאי צבי פני קרוב, שבתאי צבי אהוב. אי אפשר לתאר כמה אהבו אותו בשירות ותשבחות של השבתאים, שהוציאו משה אטיאס ובן צבי וגרשום שלום ביחד ב-1948, מובאות שורות של שירי אהבה לאדם מסוים. אין לנו עוד קורפוס כזה. יש אנשים שיש להם את הסגולה לעורר אהבה בזולתם. עכשיו אנחנו נפתח תזכרו לספר קוראים שירות ותשבחות של השבתאים, ותלמידתי הדר פלדמן סמט כתבה עכשיו ספר נהדר על השירות והתשבחות האלה, שיצא בהוצאת מגנס, ובשבוע הספר תוכלו לראות את זה. הקורפוס הגדול של שירי אהבה. אין לנו על אדם מסוים, כלומר שירים על אהבת אלוהים יש הרבה, אבל שירים שמוקדשים לאהבה לאדם מסוים, לשבתאי צבי, זה יש אחד ביחד. מכל מקום, תודה רבה לך חווה, ואני פותחת את הבמה לשאלות. מירסקי בבקשה.
היי, שלום חווה יהודה מירסקי. אז הרצאה נהדרת, תודה. שאלה אחת, מה שאת מביאה ממנו על אליליות, די מהדהדת את ריינהולד ניבור, From the Nature and Destiny of Man, שזה יצא בשני כרכים 1900 39 ו-41, שיש לו ביקורת, שיש לו המשגה נהדרת על האליליות בלבושה בקלסטרה המודרני, ואנחנו מתחילים ללמוד שיש לא מעט אינטלקטואלים פליטים מוויימאר נקרא לזה, שמצאו איזשהו ביבשת היבשה, הפילוסופית היבשה של אמריקה, מצאו אוזן קשבת וגם בר שיח בניבור. יש מבחינת הפילולוגיה של הדבר או היסטוריה אינטלקטואלית, יש מצב או יש אפשרות שהוא הושפע מניבור, מפני שההמשגה הזאת של אליליות נשמעה מאוד מאוד ניבוריאנית.
בבקשה חווה.
טוב, אני אעבור לעברית. זה יכול להיות, אני לא יודעת, לא בדקתי את זה בצורה הזאת. Something to think about. זה גם ודאי שזה אפשרי, זה לא מסובך, אבל מבחינת, אני חושבת שאם הוא היה מושפע ישירות מניבור, אז בטח היה מצטט אותו, offhand maybe רונן can say something about it. I don't remember that he refers to it, but it's not impossible, obviously. So something for me to look into. Thank you.
תודה. עוד מישהו?
שלום חווה, זה רונן פינקס. תודה על ההרצאה שלך ועל המעבר, כמו על השילוב של החיים הביוגרפיים והרעיונות, זה דבר חשוב בהקשר של פרום. ההערה שלי היא רק קטנה, כי נאמר פה כבר לפחות 3 פעמים שהוא היה תאיסט, ואז גם הומניסט רדיקלי, ואז הוא היה בעצם נון-תאיסטיק מיסטיסיזם. יש כאן די הרבה בלבול. יכול להיות שאחד הפתרונות, יש כל מיני דרכים לפתור את הבלבול הזה. ההומניזם רדיקלי משמע שאין תאיזם בכלל. וזה לא נכון לגבי פרום, כי יש נון-תאיזם ולא אתאיזם. אני חושב שאצל פרום זה די ברור ההבדל הזה, ועובדה שכל מי שאמר שהוא היה אתאיסט גם אמר פתאום שיש לו איזו צורה של תיאולוגיה שלילית. אז יואן בראון אמרה צריך להיזהר, הוא לא אתאיסט, הוא סוג של איפשהו על גשר מאוד צר, הוא נון אתאיסט, ואני חושב שצריך לשמור, אפשר לעשות המאמץ ולהגיד אנחנו לא יודעים בדיוק מה, כי אתאיזם הוא הזנחה, אתאיזם הוא לא רוצה שום משחק שפה תיאולוגי בתוך תפיסת עולם. והדבר האחרון שאני רוצה, רק הערה קטנה, כי גם כן לגבי השפעות של האלילות, יש את לונגרן שכתב את הספר Fight Against Idols, אבל אני חושב שאפשר להגיד אלילות זה בא מתוך הנביאים, ובשילוב של מרקס ופרויד, 3 אלה ביחד. איך פרויד? כי אלילות היא גילוי עריות ברמה הקולקטיבית, שם זה העניין שפרויד והנביאים משולבים, והאליניישן של מרקס, אבל שם שצריך להזכיר אולי בהקשר של ה-non-theistic mysticism זה פריץ מאונטנר, עם The History of Atheism. כי פריץ מאונטנר הוא הראשון שהכריז על מייסטר אקהרט, כעל שראינו בתמונה כאן, שהוא הביא תמונה שלו שהוא נראה 100% דתי, כן? ופתאום פרום הציג אותו, כמו שמאונטנר הציג אותו, כבעצם סוג של כלפי חוץ הוא היה בן אדם דתי, אבל בעצם הוא היה אתאיסט, או משהו בסגנון הזה. אז אני חושב שפריץ מאונטנר הוא שם שצריך להביא בהקשר הזה, ופרום מפנה אליו, בהערה קטנה, אבל משם מגיע המונח נון-תאיסטיק מיסטיסיזם, זה פריץ מאונטנר ראה את עצמו ככזה, שהמיסטיקה מבטאת את האחדות.
תרשום שלום, דבר עליו. עוד מישהו? תציג את שלך.
יורא טלר, אני לא יודע דווקא אם זה אותך לשאול, אבל זה כבר לקראת סוף הכנס. אני פסיכולוג קליני, ואני מתקשה להתחבר לטנטוס של של פרויד, ואני יותר מתחבר להיינץ קוהוט. למה אנחנו חייבים לדבר על הטנטוס, בעיקר כשמדברים על אריך פרום? אני לא, כל הזמן מזכירים את זה, ולמה אי אפשר פשוט להגיד שאריך פרום לא דיבר על טנטוס כי הוא לא האמין בו? שאלה.
חווה, זה בתחום יכולתך לענות?
לא, זה לא...
קשה היה לי לשמוע, את המשפט האחרון, אפשר לחזור על המשפט האחרון, לא שמעת אותו.
אולי אפשר פשוט להגיד שאריך פרום לא התייחס לטנטוס, כי הוא פחות האמין בזה, והוא יותר האמין בכוח של אהבה. one development line, ולא צריך את הטנטוס בשביל זה. ואני התייחסתי גם להיינס קוהוט, שהוא כבר כן אמר את זה. אבל למה כל הזמן חוזרים לטנטוס? אני מתוסכל מזה. זה עושה אותי עצבני.
אוקיי.
תראה,
בבקשה, את רוצה לענות?
יש לי פה יש לי פה מול העיניים את הספר של פרום, The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness. זה על טנטוס. הוא לא קורא לזה ככה, כן? יש צריכים אחרות לדבר על זה. אבל לא נראה לי אי אפשר לדבר על אהבה בלי לדבר על הדברים השליליים, שזה גם שנאה, גם יצר ההרס, גם הנקרופיליה. הניתוח שלו על נקרופיליה הוא מדהים, הוא מדהים בזה שזה גם נורא רלוונטי למה שקורה היום, כמובן פה בארצות הברית אתם יודעים למי אני מתכוונת, כל מה שהוא אומר על נקרופיליה ואיך שהוא מניתח את היטלר, זה מדהים כמה שזה רלוונטי היום, אבל זה במאמר מוסגר. אז אני לא רואה כאן בעיה, או דברים שאני צריכה להתייחס אליהם. לגבי דברים של רונן, אני באמת אבחן את העניין הזה של מרטנר, לא בחנתי אותו, על atheism versus non-theism, או non-theistic mysticism. It all depends. Look, let's think about Maimonides. Is Maimonides a theist? Not really. So I think because if you take away the personal dimension, and excuse me moving to English because it's a little bit easy for me. So if you think about Via Negativa really seriously, you take away the personalist dimension. So it's not atheism as you critique it, but it's definitely not theism either. So I think that's what he's about. He really adores, in a sense, the Maimonidean understanding. You cannot talk about God as a thing. So it's non-thingness that is really relevant here. So I'm not going to, we don't have to spend a lot of energy on figuring out, it's non-theistic mysticism. So it is mysticism, it's non-theistic. If you don't want to call it atheistic, that's okay with me. And to me, Buddhism is the real inspiration. And what I find so interesting in his mindset is how he has a synthetic mind. He wonderfully integrates elements from different cultural perspectives and orientations. And it all hangs together in a very kind of organic way. So it's non-mechanical combination of elements, but there's integrity there, which I'm okay calling it radical humanism, but every person you can call it also religious humanism. Some people relate to Fromm as a religious humanist. So the terminology all depends on who is writing it, who is using it, who kind of makes sense of Fromm. But to me, he kind of it's sad that he died in 1980. If he were alive today, he would have a lot to teach us all.
תודה רבה. תודה רבה לך, פרופסור חווה תירוש סמואלסון. תודה רבה לשלושת הדוברים במושב הזה. היה מאוד מעניין, כולנו למדנו ושמענו דברים חדשים. תודה נדב, תודה גלעד, תודה חווה, ותודה רבה לשרון לבנה ולכל מי שעזר לה לארגן את הכנס בכלל, ותודה על העזרה על המושב היפה הזה לכל מי שהשתתף. תודה רבה לכם, מוזמנים לקפה בחוץ.